Hey, Al McCoy here, and you are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Sun Show.
Thanks so much for watching or listening to the Sun Solar Panel podcast. My name is Tim Tompkins. On the show, Mr. Dave King, managing editor of Bright Side of the Sun. Mr. Greg Esposito, the host of the podcast.
Shazam.
So also, by the way, you got a lot of
with that cool Wranglers cap, though, too.
No.
Or not Wranglers, but Hot Shots.
Hot Shots. I've got the Wranglers helmet here as well. It's Defunct Football Saturday here.
Did your head used to fit into that helmet?
No, never. Ego's always been too big.
Yeah.
So listen, anybody that was listening to us on Spotify, if our feed is not updating, that's because for some reason there's 3 of our shows on there and only 1 is actually updating. So go ahead, search again for the Sun Solar Panel podcast and just subscribe or follow, like whatever it is on Spotify, to the feed that is updating.
Or just follow all of them.
Right. You could do that too. So listen.
You'll get credit for that if they follow all of them.
We have finally had some sort of resolution to the GM role, what Robert Sarver was going to do, breaking this down. James Jones is now officially the GM, with Trevor Buckstein reporting to James Jones as the assistant GM, and Jeff Bauer, the senior VP, also reporting directly to James Jones.
See, every organization does it differently. In this case, the senior VP of basketball operations is going to report to the GM. Last year, James Jones was the VP of basketball operations, reporting to the GM, Ryan McDonough. But now David Griffin is going to work for the Pelicans and be the head man, the top cheese, all that. And his exact title will be senior VP of basketball operations. So it all depends on how the organization wants to put the lines on the org chart.
Yeah, This is probably.
We know you're in love with this whole setup. Come on, tell us how much you love exactly what came down.
Oh, look, I honestly go back and forth because I think I've probably been too harsh on James Jones for the simple fact that he's Robert Sarver's guy. Well, and the fact that it played out very much the way the Earl Watson, which I have Earl Watson stuff at some point in this show to share, but very much the way the Earl Watson, Jeff Hornacek thing played out, and the Lindsey Hunter, Alvin Gentry thing played out. It's a guy with no experience, came in, got good with Robert Sarver, and for lack of a better term, weaseled his way into the job. And
or that just got handed it.
Or got handed it. I think that's probably more in James Jones's case. He got handed it. I think the other two may have done some shady things to undermine their previous boss. I think James Jones just happened to have a real good relationship with Sarver and got handed this job. But they're guys without experience that wound up getting the easy road to the job, and then it just concerns me. And then you give all the power to James Jones in this. And I don't want to get when this came down, I texted you guys, and I was probably a little too caught up on the semantics of all this, right? Because why hire Jeff Bauer as a senior VP and then have him report to the general manager, James Jones? Now, my problem still is you hire Jeff Bauer for one reason only, to check a box, because the NBA reportedly was unhappy with you having no experience in your front office. So you go, Jeff Bauer, check. But
that's
really,
not the reason.
You don't think?
That's not the only reason. No, it is a reason, absolutely. But it's not the only reason.
But think about it. Why would you hire the guy with 20 years of experience and give him no power and have the guy?
Because he's not great as being the only guy.
I know, but he wouldn't have been the only guy. He and James Jones would have worked as a team with him having final say, seeing as he has the experience. Now, this is the way I hope it's really structured. And maybe someday we'll find out that this is really what it is. That James Jones is at the top, where he's kind of crafting the vision, saying, this is what I want our culture to be like, this is the type of guy I want you to go after. But Jeff Bauer is really the one working the phones, doing the day-to-day stuff that James Jones hasn't seemed necessarily interested in. That's the way I hope this works out, with Trevor Buckstein doing what he's good at, understanding the cap, trying to figure out ways to get guys in here. The best part of this whole thing is that Trevor continues to be with his organization. I am a big believer in Trevor, at both the person and the basketball professional. So I'm very excited that he's still part of this front office. But I really hope that that's the way this structure is, and that the titles are just bizarre, and that James Jones really is kind of that head of basketball operations that's setting the tone for everything, and Bauer may be the one getting his hands dirty trying to execute, getting the type of player and some of the specific pieces that James Jones wants. If that's the way it is, I feel a little bit better about where we are, but the whole thing still seems convoluted, which seems very Phoenix Suns.
So I have a list of some of the things that Bauer has done in his career with the Pelicans and Detroit. You guys want to hear it?
Yes. Maybe.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Thinking about how bad some of these may be.
It's mixed. It's definitely mixed. And I just picked a few of them. He's been working in the league for a really long time, so there was a lot of different moves that he was responsible for. So I just, I picked a few and I highlighted them. So with the Pelicans and again over with Detroit, he did draft Spencer Dinwiddie 38th overall. Found a great pick there. He also traded Spencer Dinwiddie to the Bulls for Cameron Bairstow.
Oops.
Well, to be, yeah.
You're not even going to defend it.
No, I'm not defending any of this stuff. I'm just explaining there was a reputation Spencer Dinwiddie had early in his career that even he cops to, that he spent as much time questioning authority as he did executing plays, because he always knew better than the coach. And he's developed into either his coach is the perfect for him now, and Kenny Atkinson, or he's matured enough to realize when to speak up and when not to. He was always a good player. He just really rubbed the coaching staff the wrong way when he was young. But I don't want to defend that move, because why the hell would you trade him for Cameron Bairstow? And why would you, all the other, you're going to go through the list, Tim. Keep going. It is not flattering.
He appointed Monty Williams as head coach.
Actually, that's good.
And I wouldn't mind to see Monty in Phoenix eventually.
Drafted Darren Collison 21st overall.
Uh-oh.
That's pretty good.
We're starting to draw some lines here that might come to fruition here in Phoenix. So go ahead.
He drafted Luke Kennard.
That's good. Luke has turned into a pretty good player. He's not a great player. Huh?
Instead of this, that's the important part.
Go ahead.
Instead of Donovan Mitchell.
Okay, well, we'll do the same argument we always do in defense of the Suns, because we're blind fans, is a lot of other teams also passed on Donovan Mitchell.
Right. He just
I'm not as much of a fan of Donovan Mitchell as a lot of people are.
Screw Donovan Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell is still really good, and Luke Kennard's fine, but it just happened to be that was the pick right before.
Oh, absolutely. They should have definitely taken Donovan Mitchell for sure. Yes.
He did orchestrate.
But they had Reggie Bullock.
He orchestrated the Blake Griffin trade for Avery Bradley, Harris, and Boban. I think that was a really good move.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's always a bad move when you trade Boban, because that guy is just entertaining.
He did fire Stan Van Gundy as head coach.
That's probably a good move too.
Didn't they get fired together? Or not?
I don't know.
So, no,
he fired himself right after he fired.
No. So Stan Van Gundy was the president of basketball operations and the coach, and Bauer was the dude in the middle. I did some back and forth with Duncan Smith, who is a really good Pistons writer that I follow on Twitter, and I asked him about Bauer's experience in Detroit. He listed several of the moves, and none of the Detroit fans are comfortable with who did what when Stan was around, because Stan was always the voice. He's always the man dealing with the media. Bauer rarely spoke or appeared before cameras and typically only did alongside Stan. Bauer was very much the man shrouded in darkness. Nothing could really be attributed to him specifically, as Van Gundy was calling the shots. So, and they overall did poorly in building. Now, this is all relatively speaking. They did pretty well building a team that was competitive for playoff spots every year, but they didn't build a real winner. Yeah, the acquisition of Blake Griffin was actually really good. As far as what they gave up in return, because the Clippers have also retraded. Something about Tobias Harris gets himself traded a lot,
I
no
know.
matter how good he is. And I don't quite understand that. But they also, here's a couple of examples that he did real bad. And Tim, you may be getting to these, but I'll just read through.
No, that was all I put. There was more. I have like
Yeah, there was a couple that this Pistons fan, Duncan Smith, shared with me. While he clearly can't be blamed for being the architect of such signings as John Lure for 4-year, $41 million. Remember that? Remember when we let John Lure go and brought in Mirza Teletovic instead? Or accidentally hard capping themselves for Langston Galloway at noon on July 1st one year. So hard capping means that you go so far into the luxury tax and all that you can't do anything but minimum salary deals after that, unless you get yourself below that hard cap level, unless you dump salary. So they accidentally hard capped themselves on the 1st of July one summer to re-sign or sign on Langston Galloway. So we don't know. Bauer isn't like the guy who's going to fix anything, but Stan Van Gundy was also on the jump, a couple of days ago. And of course, he's a fan of Jeff Bauer because they work together. And he said Bauer's really smart and he's a really great team player. He goes along with, he's really good to have in a front office. So I think that's what he was brought in for the Suns. And I think if you really want culture to be set from the top, and you don't want Sarver's culture to be the only culture being set at the top, you can do a lot worse than James Jones as your culture setter. And putting him in charge, even if he doesn't do all the work and make all the final decisions, make all the do all the analysis to lead up to the final decisions, then that's okay, because that's not what his whole career has been about. His whole career has been about is navigating through things. They've developed. Devin Booker already said going in his exit interview this year, when the Suns won fewer games this year than they did last year. In his exit interview, Devin Booker said, the culture has changed, and now it's time for us to really build on this. And I think he meant, obviously, that they got to bring back Kelly Oubre. They like the acquisition of Tyler Johnson. They like how everyone's growing together. And he likes the future. He said, we don't even have to make big moves, and I'd be happy going into next year. So I think a lot of that has to be attributed to James Jones, setting the culture and being a calming voice of reason around all the chaos that Robert Sarver brings. So the more James Jones is put in a position to be able to do that, potentially the better.
No, I don't disagree with you there. If you listen to, and I got a chance to hear Channing Frye on Arizona Sports yesterday with Burns and Gambo, and he was brought on to basically talk about James Jones. And you listen to him, and I trust Channing. Channing's not a guy that's going to BS you. He's going to tell you what he really thinks if you point blank ask him, especially now that he's not in the league. And he talked about that James Jones is a winner. He's a guy that in everything he does, he comes with a mindset that's a championship mindset, and it's infectious. And I totally agree with that. It's just I didn't have faith that if he was the only one pulling the trigger and making decisions in terms of the basketball side of things, that he'd 100% be prepared, because he didn't. As we've talked about, scouting wasn't a big thing for him. He was wishy-washy on how you actually build a team, whether it's free agencies or he doesn't like trades or he does like trades. Like, those fundamental things are what concerned me most about James Jones. It's never been about the culture side of it. I have faith that James Jones can help build an appropriate culture here in Phoenix, depending on how much they can keep Robert Sarver out of things. Now, I was hoping Jeff Bauer might be a guy that was more likely to stand up to a Robert Sarver, that may have been what he was brought into. And I can tell you, I talked to some people around the league, and Jeff Bauer has a good reputation, is a very nice guy, but he is not the guy that's gonna stand up to ownership, right, and make sure that Robert Sarver isn't meddling in things.
It might have actually been worse if Jeff Bauer had been put in charge, because as this guy Duncan Smith says, Bauer cannot be credited with being the adult in the room with the knowledge or authority to check Van Gundy. Ultimately, we don't know what good he did, but we do know what bad he failed to prevent. And this is talking about the Pistons. So, Bauer is going to be a voice and a help and all that, but he's not a strong personality that's going to talk everybody into doing something they didn't want to do, even if it was a bad decision that they thought they wanted to do. But he'll be a good voice there. So I think if you were going to put somebody who's just going to calm the waters and keep everything professional and keep it on the up and up, your best chance among these three is James Jones. But the final comment that Duncan Smith said was, I also feel disdain for the Suns for aiming as low as they did. Maybe they inquired elsewhere and were rebuffed, but it's disappointing to see the Suns go for the middle rather than a premier executive with several on the market. We all know the answer to that one.
But that's the problem. You just said, right, Jeff Bauer isn't the adult in the room. Well, you needed to hire an adult in the room because you've got James Jones with no experience. I mean, his experience is a year removed from playing. He sat behind Ryan McDonough, and then he took over the main job and took a wait-and-see approach in his first year in a lot of things. You needed an adult in the room, and that's where the big problem is.
But the three moves that he did make, he brought in Jamal Crawford off the street, which as a player, Jamal was real bad this year, but as a locker room influence, the players in the exit interviews could not stop talking about Jamal Crawford as they walked out the door this year. They love him. And that's part of the culture has changed. Part of the culture has changed is Jamal Crawford. Another part of a changed culture, Kelly Oubre. And I know that may have been a mistake, but still, Kelly Oubre changed the culture, and Tyler Johnson helped change the culture.
Okay.
And those are all three guys.
So did Igor.
What'd you say?
So did Igor.
So did Igor. And so all those guys were guys brought in by James Jones or while James Jones was on watch. We'll find out soon enough whether Igor is really James Jones's guy. I'm a little surprised that they haven't either totally publicly backed Igor by now or let him go. But they may still be getting their ducks in a row. We could talk about all the coaching carousel that's going on right now at some point, Tim. I'll let you manage that.
Okay. One more point, though. The reason that this is not palatable to me, and Duncan Smith makes a great point, is because you sit there and you look and you see a guy like Dave Griffin, who I think we all agree is a much better candidate than a Jeff Bauer in a front office.
Well, we all agree he was never coming back here.
I don't know. There's always a chance if you're willing to spend or if you're willing to admit that you screwed up somehow. And I don't think either of those things.
Why it was never going to happen.
But those are two of the problems we have here. And I tweeted when this came out, as much as things change, they stay the same. And I feel like this is, okay, I have a room that's painted white that's a little dull. I repaint it white. I'm not overwhelmed. It's slightly different, but it's really pretty much the same with a fresher coat of paint on it. That's what this front office is. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not underwhelmed. I'm whelmed right now. And and you got to prove something to me at this point, because you've done a little bit, but not really much to change the situation.
Oh, one more comment on Jeff Bauer before we change topics. Can I do that?
Of course.
Okay. Amin El Hassan mentioned on one of the shows, probably The Jump, and so I followed up on it and confirmed it. What's interesting is Suns fans will probably be very interested to know that Lon Babby is the one who led the search for the front office executive that turned out to be Jeff Bauer.
Hey, Lon, I was actually thinking this felt a little like a Lon.
Little Lonish.
And that's fine. Like I'm one of the few that actually likes Lon and that trusts Lon's opinion, but
Yep.
with the parameters that he was working within, Jeff Bauer has experience.
Well, he was probably given the parameters.
They needed somebody with experience, and he has a ton of experience. Sometimes you just need somebody that knows how to do the damn job.
Yeah.
But also Lon, after having been in the front office under Robert Sarver for several years, Lon knows, you don't cut off your nose to spite your face, or whatever the phrase is that I want to use right now. He knows the kind of guy who's going to succeed in a Robert Sarver front office. He knows the kind of guy who is not going to succeed in a Robert Sarver front office. And that probably played a part in what kind of team player are you? And can you get along in difficult environments? Some of those experiential behavioral questions that people ask in interviews, I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Bauer aced those. Whereas other guys like Mike Budenholzer last year, like David Fizdale passed last year on the coaching search, and maybe some of their inquiries into big names, potentially big names that were out there available to be talked to, but they're much more relevant than the ones that were leaked to us previously, like Kevin McHale and Jim Paxson. But they probably talked to some other guys, and those guys wanted a little bit more assurances that Robert Sarver wouldn't be Robert Sarver. And Lon probably very intelligently made sure that they realized Robert Sarver is still Robert Sarver.
I actually think what it came down to was Lon said, "Hey, so if some farm animals came in, and defecated in your office, how would you react?" And that was Jeff Bauer said, "I would simply ask the janitorial staff to come clean it up." And that was how he got the job, which is perfectly fine, because that is a situation that can happen in this front office.
If some farm animals showed up in your office and defecated all over
now we know. Now we know how it went down.
The Suns. But we do want to thank you watching or listening to this podcast right now. And look, if you feel like you do get a lot out of it and you want to do a monthly donation of $1 or $5, or if you do the $10 option, I will personally send you a bunch of Sun swag. We would
Can they do a $7.50 option?
Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Been screaming a lot this week. But we would really, really appreciate it. All you got to do is open up the show notes below. If you're listening to the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can just look at the description, hit the support the show button. And the $1 a month option really does go a very long way. And this week we do want to thank Zach Hensley for supporting the Sun Solar Panel podcast. So Zach, thank you very much.
Right on, Zach. Thank you very much.
We appreciate you.
And then
is this where I jump in with a word from our sponsor?
It is.
Well, since I went off the rails last week, I've been giving guidelines on how to promote this week. So if you're watching on YouTube and it looks like I'm reading, I may actually be reading. So our friends over at Valley Boys, the original Valley Boys shirts, hats, and hoodies, happy to be a sponsor of the Sun Solar Panel. We're actually waiting for our gear. I can't wait to sport that. As you guys know, I like to wear fun T-shirts on this program, and looking forward to that. And fun fact about Valley Boys: all profits from their stickers are donated to the Phoenix area Boys and Girls Club. So that cool.
Is awesome.
It's boys with an S for Boys and Girls Club, but boys with a Z for Valley Boys, just so you keep that straight. And they have gear for ladies, kids, and babies too, because if your baby looks like Kelly Oubre Jr., it should be rocking a Valley Boys shirt. That same hair would be awesome. All printing, embroidering.
Should also be a model.
It should be, and a future basketball player and player in general, if it looks like Kelly Oubre. All printing and embroidery done in the U.S. That's right, U.S. made. You want that USA stuff here. So none of this China crap. You can, where you're getting U.S. made. And they offer basic premium level gear for all budgets. It's Valley-Boys. That's BOYZ.com. Link in the show notes. I think I did that better this week, Tim. What do you think?
You did. You didn't talk about another T-shirt company. You didn't.
I didn't question whether there was legality issues with these shirts. I did much better this week. So.
Oh, you just brought it up again, didn't you?
By the way, can I take a few minutes to actually, I think, kind of sort of break news on this podcast?
Yes, please.
All right. So Dave did a good piece on Earl Watson earlier this week that stemmed off of Earl Watson in the Los Angeles Times, saying that he was given a 2-week notice before he was fired, right? So let me walk you through. I have multiple sources, or as Gambo would say, multiple sources that can confirm how this played out. So back right before the preseason that year, Clutch Sports and Eric Bledsoe requested a contract extension. So from my understanding, the front office told him, look, we're not going to extend you because you have a few years left on your deal and the injury history makes us nervous. Let's wait a year. We'll talk about it. Obviously, that wasn't what Clutch Sports wanted to hear. Sarver catches wind of this request, goes to Earl Watson and says, you fire Rich Paul and Clutch Sports now as your agent, or I am going to fire you. This was done without knowledge of anybody in the front office. And it was he was told this. So this goes back to Earl Watson saying there was a demand last year that nobody knew what this demand that was made of him was. It was that Sarver and the Suns staff, or Sarver, without the front office's knowledge, told him, you have to fire Clutch Sports. Well, obviously Earl Watson wasn't going to be strong-armed like that. So this was the 2 weeks that he claimed he had noticed. He was disgruntled. According to sources, he then badmouthed the Suns organization in the locker room to the players at that point, and then he gets run 3 games into the season.
Well, and Eric Bledsoe knew what was going on.
Yes, and then it leads to Eric Bledsoe's infamous tweet and basically wanting out, because then he realizes, well, crap, because I made a contract demand, they fired a guy because they want him to fire his agent. This whole thing's nuts. That was a big part of it. So there's your entire picture of what happened. No, we never seem to be able to get the entire picture of it, and I can confirm to you that's the way it all went down.
So this whole Rich Paul as a player agent experience is setting the league on its ear. It's really making it difficult for things to operate as they always have. And now it's obviously you as a fan's call to decide who's better and who's not. Rich Paul's clients have done very well for themselves. Rich Paul's clients, the individual players, have ultimately gotten everything they wanted.
Not Anthony Davis.
Well,
Not
he's
yet.
about to.
He's about to, though. I think if you look back on it, Rich Paul's clients have got Eric Bledsoe got his $70 million and his extension just a year later, but he did it with a team that's leading the East in wins, and he is now being considered for an all-defense team as well as potentially all-NBA at some point. That's worked out very well for him. Anthony Davis, wow, this has been a very rocky 6 months, and we have yet another example of a coach or a GM saying, gosh, I think that young man is getting bad advice. The advice that Anthony Davis has gotten from Rich Paul has soured an organization and almost killed off an organization, and yet in the Pelicans, and yet Anthony Davis is going to turn out just fine. And then LeBron James has gotten everything he wants financially. While Rich Paul may have even screwed over LeBron James's legacy as an NBA player, he's never going to screw over LeBron James's pocketbook. And that's for sure also in LeBron James's favor.
Well, let me say this. I have no problem with Robert Sarver being upset with Rich Paul and the way he went about a demand with Eric Bledsoe. Again, and this is a lot of the situation.
I have a problem with him telling an employee to fire their independent agent that's supposed to advocate for them.
That is where I'm getting. Again, the way that the situation was handled. That's the problem. He can be mad, he can be upset, but you go to Rich Paul, you go to Eric Bledsoe, and you take it out. You don't go to a third party in your organization and try to strong arm him into getting rid of the guy that just upset you. That's where the problem is. I would have no problem with an owner that is involved and upset with things like that because it's appropriate to be upset about it. It was a ridiculous request at the time, but it's the action after that, which always seems to be the problem with Sarver, is the action after the normal.
It's always impulsive.
Yes, and that's the problem here.
It's never calculated. It's always impulsive.
And so
I had a long talk with some of my employees, a couple of my employees the other day, about, decision making and all that, and how it can't be. Not only can your decision making not be impulsive, but also the more transparent you are, the better decisions you're going to make, because you'll have enough people giving you input. You're still the final decision maker. I'm okay with Robert Sarver making the final decisions. He bought the damn team. He's got the money. What I'm not okay with is him not trusting, is not really taking in the advice of the people that work for him, and ultimately coming out with decisions that are best for the franchise. None of his decisions, very few of his decisions, have ever turned out to be for the best for the franchise long term. Many of them are justifiable in the moment if you consider only momentary reactionary needs and desires, but almost none of them have worked out well long term, and that's the sign of bad decision making.
well, yeah, because it looks like you have no plan.
Ryan McDonough's like, I had a damn point guard.
Well,
No, look, okay, I totally get it. Robert Sarver undermined Ryan McDonough many times. I get it. But Ryan McDonough also sucked as a GM. Any of the decisions he has been credited with as being the guy who was trusted, those haven't worked out either.
hey,
Well,
Devin Booker fell in his lap.
his
Ryan
record.
tanked to get high draft picks, and that was his strategy, and he did that effectively.
Hey,
Ugh.
if we're looking at Ryan McDonough's record and Jeff Bauer, he's no worse than Jeff Bauer is, and Jeff Bauer was now the guy that they brought in. Now,
He's worse than Jeff Bauer. Jeff Bauer was in front offices of teams that were competitive. The Suns have not even been competitive, and they're hated around the league for how awful their culture is.
Okay,
That was
and
set by Sarver and McDonough.
I think Sarver was a larger portion of that culture discussion, and what I just told you proves that McDonough took most of the blame for that originally, and and I'd always heard rumors it was Sarver, but now I've actually got multiple people that were part of that are
We also got a lot of evidence from former players that they specifically talked about the GM being a communication issue.
I don't deny that, and I don't deny that Robert Sarver was probably right to let Ryan McDonough go, but again, the way it was done is the problem. If he was going to do it, he should have done it before that entire summer started. Just like if you were going to fire Earl Watson, you shouldn't have given him the extension, which was, from my understanding, a Sarver decision, or you should have let him go in the offseason. Like, it's not, because nobody would have went, oh, I can't believe he fired Earl Watson, or, oh, I can't believe he fired Ryan McDonough. Those things in a vacuum are justifiable, and you understand that. But it's the way it gets done that's the problem, that sets the culture, because chaos is part of the culture of this Suns team, and that starts with Robert Sarver making impulsive decisions.
So I guess it is silly of us to think that we'll find out something about the ultimate outcome of Igor Kokoskov now, right? We're probably not going to find out until halfway through training camp next year.
I just don't think they're letting Igor go.
Really? I think it's just as likely that they'll just give him a pink slip as soon as they get some kind of commitment from another coach. Like Vlade, for example. Let's talk about the coaching thing right now. Dave Yeager was let go by the Kings, even though he brought them to their best record and their most exciting looking team in over a decade. Yeager was fired because he doesn't listen to front offices when they tell him who to play and how many minutes to play them. He actually just trusts himself on the court on coaching, and that gets him. He's gotten fired now from 2 different organizations who didn't like that. So the Suns aren't the only ones with an organization that has their GM or their owner telling their coaches who to play and how many minutes to play them. That's a common thing, and Yeager's been fired from 2 different organizations for not listening. But anyway, the timing of letting Dave Yeager go was almost certainly because Vlade got intel that Luke Walton was about to be let go, and now Luke Walton is Vlade's top choice to replace Dave Yeager. You don't fire an okay coach or a coach you don't have to fire until you have a better option in front of you right then. And now Vlade thinks he's got a better option in Luke Walton, and the Lakers think they've got a better option in whoever Rich Paul likes, which happens to be Ty Lue. Ty Lue, and who's the other option? I'm drawing a blank.
LeBron.
No, to coach the team.
No,
There's
LeBron.
two people they're targeting, and they're both related to. They both have a long history with clutch sports.
Yeah, if for
I'm
some
surprised
reason,
Earl Watson isn't in the running. Maybe they even know.
maybe he is. You don't know that.
We don't, do we?
To me, if somehow the Suns found out that Luke Walton was interested in their job, they'd fire Igor tomorrow for numerous.
That's what I'm saying is you could reach out. You wouldn't hire Dave Yeager?
Well, no, because of what you just said. I don't think they'll ever hire Dave Yeager because he's the countercultural thing to what they do. They don't want the guy that's gonna not listen to everything that is told from above him. So that's probably why Yeager wouldn't be on the table.
Sure. But if Luke Walton shows interest, that's when you would decide to replace your coach. What the Suns have done wrong in the past, among the million, is that they don't have a plan when they do this knee-jerk reactions. They didn't have a plan to replace Ryan McDonough as GM. They didn't have a plan to replace Earl Watson as coach. They don't have plans. So hopefully this time, if you do it right, you only fire Igor if you have a plan, which is you already know another coach is willing to do it because that coach is on the street and willing to talk contract because they're not in the NBA, and so there's not a worry about breach of contract and all that. So it would be an out-of-work coach right now, out-of-work coach who should be the only reason that would want to come to the Suns, should be the only reason they fire Igor. Whether that happens that way or not, I don't know.
I just don't think you put. I think that as an organization, there has to be some understanding somewhere. There has to be that you can't give Devin Booker 5 coaches in 5 years. That you not. I
know, right? Isn't that ridiculous? Or Josh Jackson.
Right.
That would be his 4th coach in 2 years.
There just has to be some understanding, and we saw the internal development with the vast majority of the players on the team from the start of the season to the end of the season. And there was something there. There was something there in that last Suns run that they had with Kelly Oubre. I'd be so shocked if they fired Igor.
Even Devin is totally convinced that is the path to being competitive because he said the culture's been changed. We don't even need to make big moves this summer. We're ready to come back and run it back, just getting healthy. Booker even knows it.
Well, look, should and will are 2 different things. We've established that this episode. Should the Suns fire Igor Kokoskov? Hell no, they shouldn't fire Igor Kokoskov.
Unless there's something clearly better at the front door.
But is there even guarantee that, okay, everybody assumes Luke Walton is going to be a good coach, but we haven't seen it outside of when he was coaching Warriors. So do we know?
Tell you what, you give me 4 All-Stars and I could coach them to win.
Exactly. Unless Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley have some giant falling out and Eric Spoelstra goes, "Hey James, I really want to join forces with you again," then I don't foresee anybody being a guaranteed better than where you are. You shouldn't fire Igor Kokoskov. That does not mean they will not fire Igor Kokoskov, and that's the problem.
There is a little bit of a problem. He's not the best coach in the world. He has to get better, and he is getting better. But you can't ignore that language problem. Kelly Oubre even admitted, he said, it took me a while to figure out what the coach was saying because not only does he have a heavy accent, but he also trails off at the end of his. We have him in a private media room where there's no other sound distractions. None of us are talking when we do pregame and postgame. And we still have to run it back and transcribe things for ourselves later because we don't catch all the words he actually said. And so I can imagine it being even worse in a loud gym. So I get it that there is a bit of a language barrier. But then Oubre himself said, but when you know what he's saying all the right stuff. You just have to figure out how he's saying it and when he's saying it so you can anticipate his words and you know it. He is a great coach as long as you know what he's talking about.
Well, and the funny thing about this is 2/3 of the people that hired Igor Kokoskov, and if you want to include Trevor Buckstein, 3/4 of the people that hired Igor Kokoskov are still there. So this isn't a we're firing the other guy's guy. Their fingerprints are as much on that hiring as anybody else's. So that's a cop out if they try to use that excuse to let him go. My point is, if you're in the camp that keeping James Jones was important because of consistency and establishing culture and those kind of things, you can't also be on the side of you have to fire Igor Kokoskov because it's counterintuitive.
Wait, you're saying fans are sometimes counterintuitive?
Yes, and Robert Sarver sometimes as well.
Yeah.
So this episode right here, I think we're about like 40 minutes in-ish to the episode. It was supposed to be a mailbag episode with a short intro.
So let's mailbag it up. If we need to cut it into 2 episodes, we'll post some of it in the middle of the week. Let's get us to these questions, Tim.
We'll try our best to get through as many of them as possible.
Rapid fire.
What are you? Are you the DeAnthony Melton of this show? You're the point guard. You take control. You don't play like a G leaguer.
We're gonna start calling him.
I thought it was actually good content and a good conversation, so I wasn't.
Anthony Tompkins.
Listen, a lot of these
to Timothy.
A lot of these are draft questions. That's not our specialty, so we might answer them, we might not. You know.
So we'll send it over to the timeline.
Yeah, my only draft specialty is James Jones's draft specialty, which is basically, hey, let's look at veterans instead.
my draft specialty is Zion or Ja, and I think that's exactly what James
I'm
Jones
down to just Zion, and that's it.
Yeah. Let's fire away, Tim.
Listen, if you do have draft questions, you can go hit up Kellen Olson. He has a lot of.
There are great podcasts out there who would love to talk about the draft. With you, yes, absolutely. We are not that one.
How about we'll get a draft expert on here eventually to talk about things.
We have a long summer ahead of us.
What we'll do, we'll bring on somebody that knows more than we do to talk about it.
So any of you that want to come on the show,
we had him on last year.
Yeah. All right, ask away.
Carlos S on Twitter at YamCha17 said, and I put this one first because Dave sent us something regarding this before. So this is mostly for Dave. Could you guys talk about salaries, thinking to the next season? What could Holmes and Oubre get if they are extended by the Suns? Will Bender stay? And for what price do you guys think is fair for Oubre, Holmes, and Bender? So Dave, with your well put together salary spreadsheet, what are the Suns looking at?
Okay. So let's establish the baseline. The baseline is that Tyler Johnson has control over his salary next year. He has a player option. Players are already deciding to opt into their contracts. We've already seen a couple that were player options picked up, even though the deadline isn't until the end of June. We already know that it's almost certain that Tyler Johnson is going to pick up his player option and be on the books. Kelly Oubre, you're not going to want to let him go without knowing what kind of offers he's going to get in free agency because he'll be a restricted free agent. So the Suns are going to keep his cap hold, which is almost $10 million, which is less than he would get in salary. Assuming those two things, then Richaun Holmes, there's only $1.6 million cap hold for him just to keep his bird rights, so they could re-sign him if he doesn't get a big offer in the opening weeks of free agency and teams' money dries up. The Suns would be able to go over their cap to re-sign Richaun Holmes to a reasonable deal. So given those cap holds, the Suns, and then the number 1 overall pick cap hold, or at least a top 3 cap hold, the Suns are less than $10 million available for street free agents.
What's the number 7 pick cap hold? Because that's where we're going to wind up. So
they probably then would have about $10 million available, maybe $11 or $12 million in free money. Because what happens is the draft happens late June. The player will almost certainly be picked, some player at some spot, and their cap hold is what goes against the Suns cap for July 1, when all the best free agents are going to make decisions. Most all the best free agents make decisions by the 4th or so of the year. They've picked their teams. If you're looking for the Suns to strike it big and get a huge max level free agent, all those guys are going to have made their decisions by the 4th or 5th. yes, you can argue that TJ Warren, and sure, we could trade him into cap space. Sure, you can trade Tyler Johnson into cap space. Sure, you could trade Josh Jackson into cap space, who makes $7 million next year. Absolutely, but no one's going to want to do that before they know they can't spend their money on a free agent that doesn't require any compensation going back. So the Suns are going to have to do this summer via trades. Less than $10 million is not going to get you any premium free agents.
Hypothetical for you, and this may be pie in the sky, never going to happen. But could you see a world where Tyler Johnson opts out because they've already agreed, hey, we'll give you a 5-year X amount deal
sure. So,
overall?
Yeah, Jared Dudley made a comment on Twitter just the other day because somebody was asking, it wasn't about Tyler Johnson, it was about Goran Dragic. Goran Dragic has a $19 million player option as well for this summer. And somebody asked Jared, hey, would Goran opt out of that so he could sign with another team for 3 years, 30 million, or 3 years, 40 million? And Jared said, sure, absolutely, because that's more guarantees for a longer period of time when someone's late in their career. He was talking about Goran Dragic. Goran Dragic is going to be 32 next year, definitely on the downside of his career. He won't want to retire after one more season, and he doesn't want to play himself into being really out of the money a summer from now. And so it's possible that a Goran Dragic could opt out of his player option for $19-20 million and sign a 3-year, $30 million deal with somebody, which obviously would cut then the cap expense on Goran Dragic in half if he re-signed with the Heat, or take him off the books entirely if he signs with somebody else. But Tyler Johnson is a little bit different boat. Tyler Johnson is earlier in his career. He's got, he's only 26, 27 years old, and he knows he's going to get another contract after this one. He's got 1 year left at $19.25 million. Why would Tyler Johnson not take that $20 million guaranteed in the bank and then sign another contract for 3-4 years after that, even if it's only $4 or $5 million a year? That's more total money for him than opting out for a 3-year, $30 million deal this summer.
It depends on how much somebody like the Suns is willing to go wink, wink. We'll give you 5 years, $50 million or something.
Well, let me ask you a question then, Greg. If you were the Suns, would you rather pay Kelly Oubre next season $19 million, or would you rather pay Kelly Oubre $10 million a year for the next 4 years?
Kelly Oubre or Tyler Johnson?
I'm sorry, Tyler Johnson, yes.
Tyler Johnson.
See,
so you're saying 19 for one or 10 a year for four.
Right.
I would probably, if I'm looking at how to build this team, I like what Tyler Johnson brings. I just don't like it at 19 million. I think it's more palatable at 10 over a 4-year span because he was
always at his peak around a $10 million a year player. That's what his contract was. It was just 5-5, 19. So it was 4 years, 50. So, and that was just to try to pry. That was one of those things that the Nets did to try to pry people away, young players away from other teams. And he was one of those weird second round pick poison pill guys. So that was what they did, but it was really about a $10-12 million a year contract. It just so happens that it was backloaded.
So you think the Suns would rather have him for 4 years at $10 million a year than 1 year at 19?
Yes, because I think that gives you stability. He becomes the good bench guy that can be your backup two or your backup one. The contract is palatable. He's probably the best you're going to get at a $10 million, around the kind of skill level you're going to get at a $10 million a year, and you have the benefit of knowing what he's like in your locker room. I would very much rather have Tyler Johnson around for a longer term at a less next year, which gives you more flexibility next year than the $19 million that he's sitting at right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's not a great shooter. He's not a great passer. He's a good influence on the team. But when you've got other good influences on the team, is he as necessary? I don't know. He always did have a good rotation spot for a playoff level team in Miami. So he's playable.
Hard-nosed defender, doesn't turn the ball over. That's the kind of thing that you need in your second unit. And he's good in the locker room. So I think it's worth worth that. It's better than trying to go sign some over the hill veteran. And that's not a shot at Jamal Crawford. That's a shot at the likes of Tyson Chandler, that you're going to spend that kind of money on, and you're not going to get unnecessarily encore production.
He's definitely not over the hill.
Yeah.
So the next one coming from Louis Ivan at sauce_boss003 on Twitter. He says, since TJ seemed like a man who knew he wasn't going to be here next year, what's a realistic package for the Suns that they could get in return for him? And actually, this was something that I was talking to Greg about, and I want to ask you, Dave, because when TJ Warren didn't do exit interviews, there was a lot of Suns fans on Twitter that were saying, oh, that means that TJ is gone. And I was thinking in my head that I cannot think of a time in which someone not doing exit interviews has or hasn't correlated with them being on the team the following year.
Yeah, no, I don't think, look, people say TJ's gone. No, you're not gone until you're gone. It could be that the organization feels like they would love to get a different type of player in place of TJ. It could be that TJ would rather be on a different team and not this one. But that doesn't mean anything's going to happen between now and next year. I mean, come on, we've all followed this team. We know how things go. And as James Jones says, making trades is a two-way street. The other team has to want to make the trade as well for the package of players that you think, or assets that you think are worth trading TJ Warren. Right now, TJ Warren is on a very reasonable deal, making producing 19 points a game coming off, either coming off the bench or whatever it is at 25 to 30 minutes a game. He'll give you 19 and 4. And he'll make occasional interesting steals for you. That's a functional player. And now he's making 40+% of his 3-pointers on catch and shoot. And that's a functional player. So you don't give him away for nothing. And so he may very well be on the team next year when he comes back, when everybody's coming back to training camp. But right now, the team and the player would rather he be on a different team next year.
Dave, let me ask this, and forgive my ignorance. I tried to do some research on this.
I always
couldn't
do,
find.
Greg.
Oh, I know you guys do. You guys are kind that way. But I tried to do some research on this and couldn't find a direct answer. But right now, offseason has started for anybody not in the playoffs. Are trades allowable at this point as long as they involve people under contract moving forward or draft picks, correct?
Yeah, they have to be under contract for next season. So you cannot trade an impending free agent. You cannot trade on any level. So the only guys the Suns could possibly trade in the next 2 months are Devin Booker and TJ Warren and Tyler Johnson, and then one of their rookies. And that's it. Okay,
which is fine for this. And they can trade draft picks, correct? This is going to
they can trade draft picks. The Pistons are actually a team that did something like this a couple of years ago. You can make trades.
Hey.
Right.
Look. Okay. My thought is, and I'm going to get killed for this. I already can tell you that people are going to be upset. But if I'm the Suns, I trade my draft pick right now. And I maybe package it with a guy like a TJ Warren, because the Suns draft pick is never going to be more valuable than it is right this second.
Unless they get 1 or 2.
No, he's saying before the lottery. It's more valuable now because there's a 14% chance that it's 1 and a 20-some% chance that it's 1 or 2.
Does get more valuable if after the lottery it is 1 or 2.
Correct, but if it's 1 at that point, you're likely not going to trade it. Right now, you're more likely to wind up 3 through 7 than you are 1 or 2, right? So to me, sell that lottery ticket and make and get as much as you can before it becomes 3 through 7, because I'd argue even 2 through 7 is not a pick you want. Unless it's Zion, it's really not what you want. So you can sell that lottery ticket to somebody who thinks they're a hell of a lot more lucky than you, with a guy like a TJ Warren, and maybe get some kind of larger piece that, and yes, to James Jones' point, takes 2 to tango. I get that.
It's worth a lot. It's worth a lot unprotected. It's worth a little bit more than it would be if the Suns lose and get the third to seventh pick, even just number one protected. And it's not worth any more than it will be later if you protect it higher than that. So I'm with Greg. I would roll the dice if you can get a lot back for a TJ Warren.
I'd roll the dice if you could do number one protected. But if they were to trade that pick and they ended up getting number one and it ended up being Zion, I mean,
But what if you got the legit power forward or point guard of the future? I don't have any specific names in mind.
Aaron Gordon. Let's throw a name out.
Well, Aaron Gordon's in the playoffs, so they'd have to exit the playoffs, and then you could trade for him, right?
Well, let's use him as an example of a kind of power forward that is under contract, right? If he wasn't in, let's say 2 weeks from now, when Detroit's out of the playoffs, okay? Not Detroit, Orlando. When 2 weeks from now, when Orlando's out of the playoffs, they can then make trades, okay? As soon as your team's season is done, you can make trades with players who are guaranteed contracts for next season, which includes your draft picks. So let's say Aaron Gordon's available in 2 weeks, before the lottery drawing and after Orlando is eliminated.
I roll the dice because he's better than anything you can get 2 through 7.
No. What would you roll the dice on? Unprotected?
Yeah, I would. Because
unprotected.
Yes, because I'm taking a lottery ticket that gives me a 14% shot at Zion Williamson, and that
bring it into 100% shot at Aaron Gordon.
Aaron Gordon, a guy that is better than anybody 2 through 7 that I'm going to get, which is likely where I'm going to fall, and fills a position that I badly need to fill. I take that chance because in all likelihood, you're going to be sitting there with a pick that's 3 through 7, which becomes very less palatable in a trade. You're selling it on hope. You're selling it on the thought that a GM's going to roll the dice and take a chance. I would very much do TJ Warren and that pick for somebody like an Aaron Gordon and other pieces, or maybe a lower first round pick.
So what you'd have to do, money wise, Aaron Gordon makes about $25 million or something like that.
I didn't realize the contract was so big.
It's over 20. So you'd have to trade more than TJ Warren. So you'd have to include it. So would you rather have TJ Warren, RJ Barrett, Josh Jackson, or would you rather have Aaron Gordon?
Aaron Gordon. I don't need I don't need 3 small forwards on a team that already is going to re-sign one and has Mikal Bridges. I'd very much rather roll the dice on making a deal with this pick because the perception right now is that's a high value pick.
Right, because trading Warren, Jackson, and the 2 through 7 value pick, which is an 86% chance that that's what it is. You'd still have Kelly Oubre and Mikal Bridges as your swingmen.
And to me, that roster starts looking a lot more interesting with Booker and Oubre and Aaron Gordon and DeAndre Ayton. That looks interesting to me.
All right, so we have time for one more question, and I don't know, maybe we'll start because I suddenly have a lot more time on my hands than I used to. So, maybe I can get one of these guys to come on and do like a Mailbag Wednesdays episode with me where that's all we do. I don't really know. I'll talk to him about it at some point via text. But the last question we're going to be able to get to today comes from our single female listener, Miss Diane Duran on Facebook.
Diane Duran!
She said, suppose that I am the GM and at number 2, I draft Morant. In free agency, I put all the money on Randall and Oubre. Now the team is point guard Morant.
Julius Randall?
Yes. Shooting guard Booker, small forward Oubre, power forward Randall, center Ayton. If you are the owner, are you happy with your new GM or do I lose my job?
Oh, I'd be happy with him, but I am terrified at the thought of going in with a 19-year-old point guard, 20-year-old point guard. Like I don't think that's the answer. I'd much rather
win 27 games next year.
It would probably be Tyler Johnson with Morant coming off the bench, right?
I'd much rather go veteran, established point guard, younger power forward, in the situation. But I think that would be enough to keep ownership happy for a year. But then you damn well better start winning that second year, because patience isn't a virtue in this organization.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that at all. I've never been a fan of Julius Randle. I mean, we've seen him. He's basically TJ Warren with more heft. So I think he does rebound and he does score, but he's really earthbound, so he's not going to protect the rim at all. The Suns had so many blocks in that last Pelicans game. It was just amazing. They had over 10 blocks, 10 steals, winning that game over the Pelicans. And it's just, Julius Randle is a guy you love, and then he just doesn't produce. He doesn't get you to wins, and then a 19-year-old point guard doesn't get you to wins either. So you're locking yourselves into a 27-win team with a first round, playoff ceiling in 2 or 3 years, because a 19-year-old point guard isn't going to be a good winning NBA player for 2 or 3 years. Even De'Aaron Fox, it's second year, and he didn't get him to the playoffs in Sacramento, and he had a huge leap this year and still didn't make him playoff caliber. So you're talking 2, 3, 4 years before a young point guard can carry you to the playoffs.
Last question before we go. How many wins do the Suns need to have next season?
They have to be in the 30s. That's the only way that this actually feels like an improvement.
We said this last year.
Yeah, and we feel like it was a total and utter disaster this year at 19, and I think we would have felt the same way if they were 23 or 24. I mean, they need to get into the 30s, and the names that you're starting to hear at point guard that are being thrown out there are Darren Collison, Ricky Rubio, TJ McConnell. Those are the names that Gambo, who I think we have a good feeling where he's getting those kind of names from, is starting to say. And you brought up Collison was drafted by Bauer. You start to connect the dots. That may be the actual guy that they're going after.
Ricky Rubio did make a comment. We talked about it a few weeks ago, that if he doesn't stay with the Jazz, he wants to go to a team that's winning some games.
So not the Suns.
Right. But Darren Collison, I think, actually would be a pretty good fit on the team.
Yeah, he'd be a pretty good fit. And then that's an example of where you don't need Tyler Johnson as much if you've got Darren Collison.
Darren Collison is also the type of point guard that can play with a ball-dominant shooting guard.
Which is what you're going to need. I mean, that's an obvious that you're going to need that. So
what are the chances the Suns acquire Kevin Love this offseason?
Obviously James Jones likes him. He's familiar with him. It would depend on what Cleveland really is looking at doing in the long run.
If James really wants to make the Phoenix Suns
is that
really good on chemistry. I mean, it's coming out more and more now that those guys are talking about it. But those championship teams, or at least finals teams in Cleveland, with Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, Kevin Love, and James Jones. Those guys were great friends, really great friends. And now Channing is retired. Richard Jefferson's retired, and now he's been in the broadcast booth for the Nets, and he's really incredible, actually. And now, you've got James Jones in charge, and he's got to fill out some more. He should fill out. They said they were going to fill out their front office a little bit more. You got Jamal Crawford. Does he play another season for the Suns, or does he move into a front office? That would be really cool to see some of those guys matriculate into the Suns front office.
Oh, I'd love to see Channing wind up here. But to the Kevin Love point, if he can find a way to get him here, I have no problem with that. That's the kind of move you're going to have to make to try to make this team better. And everybody's like, well, it doesn't make you a champion. At this point, you're not going to be a champion in the next 3 or 4 years. You need to get to the playoffs. You need to build this thing. And a Kevin Love helps you build this thing. It helps get these guys in a winning mindset. It gives you a piece that actually would work next to DeAndre Ayton. The money. they're already spending the money. They're almost at the cap, and it's not like it's that great as it is. So why not? And it's not your money, so who the hell cares?
I think he actually fits really well. He fits in some ways really well next to Ayton, in that he can facilitate. He's a really good high post passer that was never utilized in Cleveland very well, but was great in Minnesota. He can rack up the rebounds, and the same reasons I don't love Julius Randle, I also don't love Kevin Love, because he doesn't protect the rim. He's not going to be a defender that can backfill for Ayton when Ayton isn't defending well. So if you really want somebody who's going to be a hard-nosed defender and all that, that's not going to be Kevin Love. So there will still be problems with the team with those two as a long-term front court.
So you're saying that if you have Devin Booker, Kevin Love, and DeAndre Ayton, it won't be a great defensive team?
I am. I know. Shocker.
Hey, so we got to go.
Breaking news.
I do want to give an update. We had talked about it a little while earlier. We were talking about who the second candidate was for the Lakers. We actually talked about him a little while ago as well, Monty Williams.
Oh, yeah.
That'd actually be a good hire.
That would be a good hire. Monty Williams is really great for reaching players and working with players and making them feel. He nursed that Pelicans team, the pre-Alvin Gentry Pelicans guys, through a lot of real problems off the court, and he kept them, focused on the court. So actually, he may not be the greatest tactician as a coach, but Monty Williams is an incredibly, supremely respected guy in the league.
Perfect kind of LeBron James coach. It's a guy that can keep the locker room together, but and that's what you need in that kind of a situation.
Monty Williams is better than Ty Lue.
Wow, go out on a ledge there, Dave King.
I'm the ledger today. Yes.
Scalding. All right. So on that note, if you do want to support the show, if you feel like you get a lot out of it, we love you. We appreciate you. Just open up those show notes below and hit the support the show button. Greg, Dave, we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, everybody.